Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Dr. Isti, Dr. Nur Ahmadi, Deputy Director of Research and Innovation, Professor Emeritus Dr. Theo M, Editor-in-Chief of Plant Biology, University of Groningen, Dr. Taufikur Rahman from the School of Life Sciences and Technology, SITH ITB, Dr. Karlia Meita, our moderator for today, and all respected lecturer, research assistant, and postgraduate student of ITB. Let us begin by expressing our gratitude to Allah Almighty. It is by His grace and blessing that we are able to gather here today for sharing session, Volume 8, carrying the theme From Submission to Publication Behind the Scene with Journal Editors. Today's event also marks the launch of the CERDAS program, coaching and research and drafting of science articles, an important initiative to strengthen scientific publication capacity within ITB. This event is a collaboration between the Direktorat of Riset and Innovation, DRI, and the School of Life Sciences and Technology, SITH ITB, reflecting our shared commitment to advancing research excellence and internal visibility. Dear audience, here is the agenda for this afternoon session. Opening and welcome remarks from Dr. Taufikur Rahman, representing SITH ITB, sharing session with Professor Theo. Discussion and Q&A session followed by group photo with Professor Theo, souvenir presentations, launch of the CERDAS program, closing and group photo. To begin today's session, let us listen to the opening remark from the representative of the School of Life Sciences of Technology, SITH ITB. We kindly invite Dr. Taufikur Rahman to deliver his remark. Please.
Oke. Bismillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, we thank God for enabling us to be together here in this Crimson PAU building. So thank you very much to Direktorat Riset dan Inovasi ITB for conducting this meeting, which is, I think, very important for us. So Pak Prof. Theo M, he is from Groningen, of the Netherlands. So he is a Professor Emeritus already, and he has got experiences in chairing the chief editor of Q1 journal, Plant Biology, if I'm not mistaken, since 2005. Yeah, it's already been about 20 years. So actually, Pak Theo, since 2020, has been appointed by SITH ITB as the honorary professor, and also visiting professor. So almost every year, he come to ITB, and that's also the time is matched with the time that we conduct almost every year also the international conference on plant science, on plant and microalgae bio-based industry. So that will be held for this year next week, inshallah. So I think without further ado, I think that's what my sepatah kata. Sepatah kata is a piece of broken word that in Indonesia. Or a preface for a book with a broken English. I think we hope that we can gain knowledge from him and also experiences as the chief editor of this international journal, prestigious international journal. So yesterday I also attended a meeting conducted by DRA, Pak Elfahmi and Pak Rino yesterday, where ITB is going to make a new system from OJS system, open journal system, to our own system. We call it wawasan at that, well, still temporary, but not yet concluded. I think that's all. Thank you very much. Hope we can get a lot of knowledge from Pak Theo. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Taufikur Rahman, for your warm message. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the main agenda, the sharing session, volume 8, with the theme From Submission to Publication, Behind the Scene with Journal Editors. This session features Professor Theo, Editor-in-Chief of Plant Biology, University of Groningen. The session will be moderated by Dr. Karlia Meita, Assistant Professor from SITH ITB. We now invite Dr. Karlia Meita to lead the session.
Okay, thank you, MC. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for coming to this very insightful discussion that we're going to have this afternoon with Pak Theo. So Theo always come every year. We don't call him anymore Professor Elzenga. We just call him Pak Theo, and it's okay later when you want to ask. Now we're going to discuss from submission to publication. But yesterday I told Theo that after publication, it's more important that our publication gets cited. So if you don't mind, later we can go from submission to citation. Also, there will be tips and tricks from him, so we get a lot of citation. But first, please allow me to introduce Pak Theo before we're moving on to the main talk from him. If the operator can put the slide of Pak Theo's CV on the screen, that would be great. Okay, so as Pak Taufik has mentioned, actually Pak Theo has been coming back and forth to Indonesia for the last 3 years, but then he was appointed since 5 years ago. Pak Theo currently, he was one of the staffs in plant ecophysiology in University of Groningen. And from, as you can see, his impressive CV here, that he's been the Vice President Royal Dutch Botanical Society for 20 years, and then 10 years board member of Groningen University Fund, and then from 2015 to 2020, member section agriculture of the Netherlands Commission on Genetic Modification. So some of you who has researched there perhaps can discuss about the publication regarding genetic modification as well. And yeah, for his scientific career, he's not only the honorary professor here at ITB, but also in University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore, India. And he has been the editor-in-chief in Plant Biology, a very prestigious journal. I have never published there. Hopefully one day I can publish in Plant Biology. And he's also the referee for Plant Journal, Protoplasma. So let me see. None of that I have published. I've tried experimental botany during my PhD, but yeah, it was not successful. Yeah, from the SEB, experimental botany. So, do we have another slide of his CV? Okay. And for his scientific career, yeah, his last position was as the director of Education Research Institute of Galifest. And can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, and also, also now Pak Theo is the Scientific Steering Committee of Dutch-British Antarctic Research Program. Exciting, research in Antarctic. Okay, so perhaps there would be the short introduction of Pak Theo. Now, without further ado, let us welcome Pak Theo. And Theo, please, the floor is yours now.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm picking up my clicker, or is it this one? Okay. Okay. So, yeah, here it is. So, actually, I'm really pleased to be here. I also gave a lecture last year on exactly the same topic, and I thought it was very valuable not to start at the moment you have already written your paper, because then the possibilities of really increasing your chances of getting published in the chosen journal is actually already beyond repair. And so what I focus on with my students is always, if you want to get published, you really have to already look for what is needed for publication right from the start. And if we think of doing science as the work that we do to collect data and then do a statistical analysis and then graph your papers, and that is the fun stuff, and then consider writing it up as difficult and tedious and maybe frustrating, and then you don't get the whole picture, because science is really about communication. You do that in the Institute, hopefully every day on a very regular basis, that you talk about your data. But if it stays within the Institute, actually nobody outside will learn from it. And so scientific writing is our ways of communicating with the world. And we should actually sort of start to love this frustrating activity. And so what I want to do is also go through some of the steps that actually influence your potential, your chances of getting published in the higher quality journals that your ambition lies at. So you have all followed writing classes, probably, hopefully. Yes? You have some formal instruction on how to write a paper. And it's all about the structure of the paper and what style to use, very important. And what you cannot do in the ethical sense, you cannot copy literal sentences, and you have to always refer to where your sources are. And that's all very formal. But if we start to think about, okay, what is the function of writing a scientific paper, then we come to, it's actually the only way in which we communicate science with our colleagues and with the world. And the only way in which you get your science being used and benefiting the world. And we should always keep that in mind, because the world is paying us. The Indonesian society is paying for your projects and the work that is done at this institute. Then they also have a right to get a chance of looking into it and pick the things that are worthwhile and maybe can be developed in something which is applicable. And the third one in the list, the bottom of that list, is it's actually the only way nowadays to advance in science. If you want to have a job at a scientific institute, no matter where you are, all over the world, they count your publications and they rank your publications. And they want you to have published in as high a journal as possible. And so whether you like it or not, and I hope you start liking the writing procedure and trying to get it published in as high a ranking journal as possible, it is essential for a scientific career. Okay, writing is a very essential part in actually our scientific cycle. And the cycle starts with, most of the time, it's an observation or somebody else's observation that he puts under your attention. And then, based on that observation, you start to formulate hypotheses or formulate questions, and you choose the best question to work on given that observation, the most interesting point or the most promising point, or the questions that are most
likely to lead to something which is actually relevant and has a wider application to maybe other fields. After these questions, you start to formulate hypotheses. You design the tests that are intended to test the validity of these hypotheses. You do the test, you analyze your data, and then you have a conclusion. And then you have to communicate. And those two, your conclusion and your communication, can be the starting point for a next cycle. For yourself, but also for somebody else. And that is the way we advance in science. A little bit theoretical, but in practice, that is the way you go about in moving on. So if you have this structure of a scientific paper with an introduction and with a certain structure of what does belong in an introduction, it's what is known, what is unknown, and your idea of how that you had to fill the gap in knowledge that we have, they are all going from very broad to very narrow, and methods and results, number 4 and 5, are actually very narrowly focused on your own. But to be effective, and that is the first pointer I want to make from an editor's point of view in a journal, to widen it up and show the potential for your very narrowly formulated methods and results, to widen it up and say, okay, but when I conclude this might have actually implications for other areas as well. That makes it actually a lot more interesting for somebody to read your paper and also really cite it as, I've got my ideas from writing that paper by one of you, and that is the starting point for my next cycle of research. And that is how this works. So pay attention to broadening out at the end of your paper to make it apparent for a lot of people that are reading it to sort of look at what use they can have of that paper and then start using and citing it. With my students, I always strongly focus on that starting point, the question that you ask, the thing that you are interested in. And most of the time, hypothesis that you formulate is actually dictating the way you set up your experimentation or your testing protocol or the design of your proposal to get a grant or something like that. Because basically, this is from biology. You have certain styles, sets, groups of questions that another Dutch guy already 50 years ago formulated in this very formal structure. So if you have a question in my field, plant physiology or plant ecophysiology, I always have to choose between basically the at present type of questions. How does it work? What is the mechanism? How does actually a plant respond to salinity in the soil or something like that? And what is the adaptive value of the mechanistic changes that plants that are better at that has for it? But there are also people that say, okay, I'm not so much interested in the mechanism itself, but how it develops in a young plant or in an embryo growing to maturity, for instance. And, I mean, the type of question actually dictates what kind of experiments you're doing. Yeah, and so it's really important to already realize it before you have to go back after you have done already maybe some experiments, just as a trial, and say, oh, this actually gives me only data that never allow me to conclude the things that I really want to know. So pay attention to what kind of question and how you translate those into your research design is essential for at the beginning of a research project. So this is a slide summing up. If you get it wrong, it might lead to a lot of additional effort. So therefore, every minute you spend on thinking really deeply about how you design your experiments and do they really give me the answers that I want to have, pays itself back a couple of times over. So don't rush into just, okay, it looks good, let's go to the next step and sort of start thinking about the statistics of my testing or something like that. Think really properly about your questions. Okay, now you have finished your data collection and you start to write. And ideally, if you start to write, your storyline actually starts with, ideally, the same question as you had when you proposed it in your grant application or at the start of your first experiment. But most of the time, it doesn't work actually like that. And you're at the level of master and PhD and beyond. So master reports in our university, most of the time they start with, initially we thought this, and then we did an experiment, and then we changed our mind and did something else. So that's more or less a historical narrative on what they have done and which results they got. Completely logical for an undergraduate or a starting master student, but it is not interesting reading. We have to do it to give them a grade, but I mean, it's not a story. It's not a story about, I was wondering about this, based on an observation. We thought that this might be a logical explanation for it, and how do we test it? And then we did these tests, and these were the results. That is a storyline which is much more interesting. So don't hesitate, even though you got grants from the government or whatever, to work on a certain topic. If you submit a story to a journal, make it a good story. Yeah, not a historical account on initially we thought this. That is when you report to the granting agency itself, not for a submission in a journal. Oh, I want to go back. Yeah. So, I think I did it all. Yeah. So, the basic question is, don't hesitate to rethink before you start writing about what story you write. And it's not the story about your doing research, it's a story about, okay, from these data we can conclude these conclusions. So if we go to, and this is part I left in, maybe it's not for you, but some of the students that I have, and also PhD students that I supervise, they want to start writing before they finished this step. Yeah, so deciding on how do I present my data. I assume the statistical analysis has been done. You have your data there. And I always say, okay, now start to really make the data, present the data in a way that we are going to finally use them in the submitted manuscript. First, work up all the figures, all the statistics to publication level. And the reason why I say that, because it helps you think properly. If you have presented the data in a format that is easily read, supporting what you assume is going to answer your, start all over again several times in formulating how your storyline will develop. So cleaning up your data, and I just show here a couple of steps that are very simple example. So these are yield data from 5 farmers, and actually the original paper just put these data in the text. And so that is okay if you are afraid of tables, but if you just want to make them accessible to the readership and also to the editors that have to evaluate whether your paper is good enough for submission, then you really have to clean them up. So a table is already better. Maybe it's better to do it vertically instead of horizontally. Maybe the alphabetic order is not suitable, but we should arrange them in the order in which the yields were. It's easier to see which farmer was doing best. And then maybe the number of decimals is not okay. And often a mistake, even I see them in manuscripts that are submitted to my journal. I see over precision in the number of decimals that are, so the number of decimals on your display of the machine that you are used to do the measurements is often not significant at all. So please think about that. put labels on it, often also forgotten. And now this is an interesting one, because this is something which I send back manuscripts back to the authors and rethink this. So these farmers not only had their yields, but also somebody had come in and measured the pH of the soil in their fields. And for every farmer, there's also then a typical pH value. So you can do it like that. You can also do it like that. I don't really think there is a preference for that. I mean, it could be a table and you have the data accessible. It's more transparent to the reader. He can work with the data instead of having to eyeball what those values were. But probably for some people that are more visually in their evaluation of data, this is a nicer one. This is an absolute no-no. So this is also happening even in our journal, Q1 journal, that people have non-scaled values on the x-axis and they use an XY plot. Yeah, so they even put regression lines to it. I don't know how they do it, but I mean that's the way some of them work. So here you can see already the same as in that bar graph, that pH apparently has an increase in pH has an increasing effect on the yield. But this is actually probably what they wanted to show in the paper itself. This is actually, in principle, not correct to do it like that, because the assumption here is that if it is presented as an XY plot, you assume that the x-axis is independent. And of course, this is just a derived value. And so you have no control over the pH value. It's just another measured value. And a lot of the studies that you see actually implicitly use this, but most of the time is in the form of an ANOVA. So these factors actually explain some of that. But to plot it like that, keep in mind, there is a police there watching you, and this is forbidden to do it. I also come across papers that I tend to reject, in which too much of results and discussions are mixed when there is no obvious reason to do it. There are occasions where you say, okay, well, results and discussion should be mixed because there is no way that I can explain without all my consideration why I did it, to go from table 1 to figure 3 or something like that. So if that is the case, that there is already quite a lot of interpretation needed for the reader to follow your steps, then please mix results and discussion, but often do that not. But on the other hand, don't sort of assume that the reader is just making up his own storyline from just looking at the figures and the tables. Yeah? Help them a little bit by have some connecting text and the reason why you went to the next type of measurement before you do that. There is a real trend going on in that authors do not provide a legend to the figures and the tables that I would really like to have. And I give you also an argument later on why it's also beneficial for you to just stick to the old-fashioned rule. It should be possible for a reader to, without consulting the text, understand the figure and the table. So provide them with enough information so without having to read through all of the other words that you have written, you can get a grip of what is actually meant or is shown in this table or graph. Don't go into interpretation, but just give all the basic information that is needed for somebody to see what is happening. Just a title, not enough. Yeah, so give all the information that is needed. Okay. So why do I say to my students, finish all that, make everything really pretty, optimal, 100% flawless. This is the way we're also going to use it when we submit it to the journal. And that is what this exercise is about. So you have your figures in your tables, and you make space on your desk, and now you start to sort of order your figures and tables to tell the story that you have in your mind that you want to tell. And that might involve a couple of discussion rounds with a colleague or a supervisor or whatever co-author that you have. If this is really the take-home message at the end, or the final conclusion that we want, or the strongest argument that we can make based on our data, how do we present it? Do we start with this figure and present it as some sort of initial value, or do we present actually figure one is the conclusive figure, and then say why do we are able to conclude it, because this is the supportive data. I mean, all kinds of styles you can think of how to make a story out of a sequence of tables and figures. Yeah? Everybody recognizes that, or is this something abstract for most of you? That you actually can tell several stories with the same set of data, depending on how you order the figures in the tables. Yeah, and don't go with your first gut impression. Also try something else as well, because just going with it, I think this is perfect, and not trying something else will maybe in the end prove you wrong. But it's really valuable to do this exercise before you start actually writing words. Okay, and this is actually the point where my students find it really difficult, the writing process, to do it right, to not just give the report that they gave during their first assignment in master, when it was just a historical account. That's easy, but to make a story. So there are two reasons why it's complex in the mind of my students, at least. It is complex. Yeah. There are so many choices to be made, and you cannot oversee what the effect of one choice is over the other right away. You have to go through it. And the other thing is, students, and I do it myself as well, because that's one part of the pitfalls. You make it complex yourself by mixing the stage of designing your storyline and the actual writing. Yeah, so everybody's always afraid to kill their babies. And so if you have written already something, it's always, oh, that's a waste of time. That realization is not something that we accept in our head easily. So most of the time I've already started writing it. I just continue. And while you actually should have come to the conclusion, it's the wrong way to start the story. Start all over again. So, but we are always, even though it's just bits in a computer, we're always a little bit hesitant. We put already the effort in, and now I have to wipe it out again. We don't do that often. So the copy editing is something really for the end. And why do I do that in between? Because sometimes it's a good reason for not yet tackling the next problem that I have with this paper. Yeah, it's procrastination. I do something useful, I beautify my text already, get all the typos out. I did something valuable, and I didn't have yet to think about how I should reorder my storyline. So it is some sort of procrastination that my students are doing also, that they say, okay, I already start sort of doing the formatting, the right line, left line, justification and stuff like that, get all the formats in the right lettering and size and stuff like that. I mean, wait with that till the end. It's a lot of work that you do probably for nothing. Okay, so about here, students are starting to slow down, get frustrated, get bored with that whole tedious process of writing. And there are very many books and articles that are written on how you can sort of pull yourself out of that swamp, yeah, where you get yourself into. It's frustrating. You have another day of not producing anything. It becomes really a task that you're not looking forward to at all. And if you're noticing that, talk to somebody else. For a student, I advise, go to see somebody, get advice. And I was happy to see, although it was in Bahasa, that there is also this initiative of starting some sort of counseling on getting to the first draft. This is the point where you not only have that as an option, but I would say just do that. Yeah, see if there is somebody to help you there. Basically to motivate you that it's not all wordless, that it's actually already taking shape and stuff like that, and maybe sit with you by making a couple of those decisions. So keeping the problem to yourself, that's the takeaway message for anybody who is a starting writer, is not going to make the problem go away. You have to find somebody to assist you in that. Okay, so this is just an in-between. So before I go to the discussion, this is what's supposed to go in the results. And so arrange it in a logical format, and that shows you in the best way you can do to tell your storyline. And now the discussion. And I always advise everybody to make it as logical and as strong as possible. You have to do a couple of things in a discussion. Basically, there are just 3 things that need to go into to a discussion. You have to place it in the wider context. Do my data actually agree with what is already known in this body of evidence that we have collected? And compare it with the literature, but also where your data might deviate from that and what it tells you. And then finish the paragraph, every paragraph, to sort of, okay, conclude for the reader. It's just service. Yeah, don't expect them for the reader to pick up the excitement that you have about your data. That's why you include it in your paper. That's why you write it and analyze it in this discussion. But you have to help the reader also to share the excitement that you feel. So add your own conclusion at the end of each of those paragraphs. Basically, what I do here is cut up. So you have an overall design of your discussion, and then try to, in that division, try to finish every individual division as some sort of extended separation again. So how does it fit in the overall context? How do I add something to it? And what does it mean? What is the take-home message? And do that for every section of your discussion. That makes it easier to write, but it also makes it easier to follow for a reader. Okay, this is basically what you always have to keep in mind. So you have to convince other people that what you did is really exciting. Yeah, you have to have had that idea when you started the project. You had to have that idea when you collected the data and saw them come in and analyze them. And you also have to have that when you write it up, just to put that feeling also in the minds of at least the editor-in-chief of the journal that you're going to submit it to, but also to get it used. People have to see that, okay, I didn't see it at first, but now I see that this is really valuable, and I see the potential for it. And I mean, express your excitement about your own data. Don't be really a little bit undercooled and said, okay, well, we collected this, I'm writing this up as a professional, you make of it what you want. No, you have to have that sense of, I want to bring this over to the readership. And so it's not only the starting point in the introduction that I come to as the last point. The introduction should already convey some excitement. Why did you start with this project in the first place? That has to show excitement already, but also in the end, in the discussion, giving the answer to that question, ideally, you have to be really forceful in saying, okay, this is relevant. If it isn't relevant, why bother to go through this whole process in the first place? So you have to be excited about it. So now the introduction is next. So my sequence is data analysis, make them publication grade, design your storyline, write results, write discussion, and then go back to introduction. Yeah, don't start with the introduction because it's easy. Because an introduction, is that some kind of short literature review? I can write it anytime because later on I will see how my storyline develops and it should fit the review that I have. No, don't do it. Pay attention to the introduction because it has to start with excitement. Yeah? And if you don't know your conclusion yet, how can you bring up that excitement in yourself, let alone in the readership? Yeah, so really provide a background. So why are you doing it? Is there some economic relevance, societal relevance? Is it helping world peace to come sooner? Something like that. And then what do we already know about it? And then what is actually your presentation, your contribution to it? So always finish with the aim. This was our hypothesis. This is what we were going to test. Yeah, it's a complete matter of taste, whether you already sort of use your final conclusions in the introduction. There's nothing against it. There's also nothing against having some suspense going on. Yeah, that they keep wondering. I wonder what they come up with as an answer. Okay. So the why is really important often. Some people think it's so important that the why is also mentioned in the abstract and almost taking up half of the abstract. Don't do that, but the why is really important. It's easier for answering a why question to actually get people excited. They can follow you. Okay, this is what you wanted yourself. I've wanted it myself as well. It might follow from previous research, so we are digging deeper, or this was really intriguing and now we follow that line of research. Sometimes it's just a practical problem that people have. So in agriculture, there are plenty of problems going on, and it's really easy to formulate a why answer to what you've done. And this is something which I, as an editor, cannot stress enough. That somebody hasn't done it before is not a good reason. Yeah, if somebody has done it before, you don't have to redo it. But the only reason that you do something is because somebody else has not done it yet is not sufficient. Yeah, probably there's a reason that somebody else did not do it before because it's irrelevant or whatever it is. You have to sort of motivate it for something else, but nobody else has done it. Yeah, so don't do that. So I reject as editor-in-chief about 40 to 50% of the papers that are submitted to plant biology. Half of that is because there is no motivation. Yeah, most of the motivations that I do reject is this is a plant that nobody ever have had a plant physiological characterization of before, and then they start measuring photosynthesis. I know already in advance, plants photosynthesize. Yeah, and all of the species photosynthesize. That particular one that is really rare and nobody looked at is not different from that. So it doesn't add much. Yeah, do you see my point, why I do that? Okay, and now I think the thing that you all are here for, how do I get my work noted and published? This is abstract and title. So who of you have already or are working now on a paper? None of you? Most of you have published papers or not? Yeah? Okay, how much time of writing the paper have you allocated for thinking about the abstract and the title? Very little time. I must admit, my first paper, just the day that I put it in an envelope, at that time we had to really send it, I thought of the title, and then I had already glued it and put it in the tray, and then I told my supervisor, I was a PhD student at that time still, I told my supervisor that I had put a certain title, and he said, get the envelope back, open it up, retype the first page. This is not a good title at all. So I assume that most of the people that write and submit papers, they have spent very little time on thinking about a good functional title. And also the abstract is, okay, it's just a summary, isn't that what it's, so I just take the main points and put them in. Realize that this is your PR machine. This is where the marketing of your paper goes on. Yeah, and I explain to you why. This is actually one of the exercises that I would really encourage you to do. You have to realize that before you submit a paper and have high hopes of, now I'm going to send it off to Nature and they will love it and immediately without revision accept it. I mean, that doesn't happen actually. But you have to get it past the editor-in-chief. Yeah, so I'll show you later how plant biology works. Everything comes on my desk first, my desk and my colleague in Germany, and we already decide whether it's interesting enough to put it in the review procedure. Do I read the whole paper? Nope. I read the title, I read the abstract, and I go through the text and look most of the time some of the figures and then the end of the discussion. That is what I do as an editor-in-chief. Nothing more. Yeah, I don't read the whole thing. I mean, it would take up all my days to do that. So the next thing I want you to notice is that the acceptance rate is very different between journals. And I will later tell you that you should never look at a journal that promises this as a 93% acceptance rate. Because everybody knows that journal probably as a not for good journal at all, because probably there is no review procedure installed, which is actually quality assurance. Yeah, so I'll talk about that later. But there is acceptance percentages from 1% in one journal to close to 100% in another journal. But if you are talking about Q1, it's never more than 50%, never, ever. Yeah, and often a lot lower. So just look through this. There are several reasons why you should opt for a certain journal, and I go through them later, but bear in mind, I mean, the acceptance rate is not really something which is sure. Okay, this is the exercise I would like you to do when you are back at your computer, and just characterize your own field of work with just 4 keywords, and then put it in Google Scholar. And this is a metric which is really sort of a cold shower for most of us, I think. If you look at how many papers there are in Google Scholar, and you can also set it to the last 4 years or the last 3 years, but it's tens of thousands of papers that probably fit all of your profiles. Yeah, so I just have my profile as plant roots, nutrition of plants, electrophysiology, something like that. And I have over 200,000 competitors in the database. So who is going to notice my paper if he's looking for references to use in his paper? Yeah, so if he wants to sort of write an introduction and sort of check what is known actually about this topic at the moment, why should he pick mine among those 200,000? Well, there are a couple of pointers that I can give you. But it's a refreshing refreshing exercise that you think, oh, I'm filling this small niche where I am the expert and nobody else has it. No way. There is so much published in the last couple of years. No matter how exotic your topic is, there's probably somebody else also working on it. And so you have to stand out to get noticed and being cited. Okay, so the title, let's talk about the title. It's an advertisement, yeah? It's an invitation to readers to get intrigued and start reading. That's what a title has to do. And why is it the title and the abstract? because we all work online, and most of the body of a paper is actually behind a wall. Yeah, what most journals do, they make it freely available to everybody to look at the title and the abstract. If you want to look at the whole text, you have to sort of log in through your institute, or you have to sort of agree with their cookie settings or stuff like that. So most people just go through the whole thing and said, oh, that's an intriguing title. Ah, that's where your title comes in. And then they start to read the abstract, and there it has to be reinforced that it's really an interesting paper to do. So it should be clear, informative, and brief. No really lengthy ones. It should tell the essence of your story. So you might think of it as the shortest abstract that you can dream of, but still gives you the most valid points that you come up with and use as your end conclusion. It should be obvious from your title. And then, so there's also now here a reason why a lot of titles are da-da-da-da-da, and then a subtitle, because the subtitle can be very long and explain what your main point is, but it should always also be present in that first part of the title. Yeah, there is a reason why people have started using these double titles, but it is the first part of the title. Okay, you can have very different forms. A question, a title that ends with a question mark, so or is this and this gene really involved in some process or something? The main title and the subtitle with a colon, the main title and the subtitle with a dash, an affirmative statement. Yeah, so it is like this, yeah, like Trump. And then you have the very short one, and then the lots of nouns, and often just some sort of play with the good, the bad, and the ugly as a title of a movie or something like that. And then you have the good, the bad, and the green one or something, if it's in plant. Any of these titles will work just as fine. There's no statistical analysis that shows that having your title as a question is better in attracting citations at all. You can use anything that you want, as long as it is informative and short. However, there are a couple of correlations, and I used a couple of examples that I made Dutch, and you should not try to Google those because I sort of modified them. Too general and too fake. Some observations, never do that. Nobody is going to look a second click into your paper. Yeah, some observations on what type of observation did you just look at? This is just too vague. Then the two specific ones. Leaf rolling in Ammophila arenaria and Elamis fructus, two dune plants measuring using a digital probe. There are several reasons combined in this title why nobody is ever going to cite it. There are very few people that are interested in Dutch dune plants. So the Dutch is not informative. Maybe it's informative, but it's not helping you. So if you are working on a plant species which is purely present in Java, don't mention it in the title. Yeah, it's only the people that are really interested in the Java vegetation that will pick that one up. So it's also because it is a couple of species which do not sort of trigger immediate attention because they are model species or because they are often used by other people. If you say something like Ammophila arenaria would be an excellent model plant, then suddenly it becomes a completely different title. Then people will maybe start to pick it up. And rarely used techniques for a specific measurement is also not helpful. The exception is if you have a techniques paper where you want to introduce a certain new technology. Those are actually highly cited. So if you are in that field, then please use any title that you want because it doesn't matter what title you give it, as long as it's obvious that it's a novel title for a specific process. So leaf rolling as an effective adaptation to overcome periodic drought conditions is actually a real title, and it does get cited because drought conditions, occurring periodic drought conditions, they are an issue which is experienced by crops, and so a lot of people will actually pick on that. And no mention of the species name, it's irrelevant. It's the leaf rolling as a process that is important. Okay, now, also the abstract is open for evaluation by everybody, so you don't have to sort of open the door to get behind the wall where the full paper is available. And basically a lot of the things that I said about title apply here also, except for the shortness. Be as informative as you can on what the main storyline and the main conclusion is. And nowadays, actually, ResearchGate also, this is the point I wanted to make about work on your legends for figures and tables. They make those available as well. So people that are scanning just for interesting papers without having to really decide already to actually pay for it or to get to the trouble of entering the subscription pages. If you have a well-written, informative legend to all your figures, it might attract actually more interest because, okay, I already know that this is interesting and they put the effort in. A lot of people, if they have decided already based on this to put the effort in and read the whole paper, or at least try to really get to the bottom of that particular paper, they also have a high likelihood of using it in their citation list, because it is a little bit of a trouble and nobody wants to waste trouble. So it is in their reference program and they might actually start to use it. Okay, so is there any way I can make the slides available to all of you? Then I don't go through all these lists, save some time. But anyway, so there are a couple of rules in an abstract. Be as long as the journal allows you to be. So if they value extended abstract, make use of it. Don't just use half the space they provide, because, and that is the reason also for an abstract, you provide the keywords that people use to find your paper, but actually it is in most of the search engines, it is strengthened by also using those keywords in the abstract. Yeah, there is a higher likelihood that they end up higher in your search engine. Okay, now, which journal should you choose to submit your paper to? These are all possible valid criteria for you to consider. So the impact factor, whether it's open access or not, and whether you have the funding or whether your institute or your country actually mandates that it's open access. The publication turnaround time, there is something that I come back to here, because everybody is really liking very fast turnaround times, but it's also an indication for predatory journals. Yeah, so beware of that. The scope of the journal, does it match your readership? If you want to be cited, people like me, and maybe you as well, you have your sort of, okay, if it's something which comes up in my search and it is from that journal, then probably it's more likely that I'm interested in it, because you have your certain set of journal titles that you know that it's about the same level or the same interest field that you are in, so go with that. And does it meet the criteria of your institute for being promoted or getting a grant or something like that? It's really important to check that, whether all these criteria are met. So you can go through this set of things that you have now gotten from me. You can also go, and that's the way I do it, which journal actually do I get my information from most? And then go with that one, because I know that probably people that I am interested in what they do, they probably use the same journal for their information as well. And so it's good to sort of have a list of which references do I use most, from which journals do they come. And that's probably also the readership that you want to apply to. And also probably if you see journals or manuscripts in those journals that you really like, it's probable that your work is also meeting their scope references for getting accepted. Okay, so where do I find impact factors? I hope that everybody knows these sites and how to calculate whether it's actually a Q1, which is mandated by ITB, isn't it? Q1. And certain funding is requiring Q1. So it's the top 25% of the journals. And Web of Science, but also Scopus actually gives you those data on every journal that is in there. It gives you the ranking, which percentage of them are higher or gold. So then the open access, it's got different levels. Gold, which one is mandated here in Indonesia? Do you know that? It has to be open access, and it doesn't matter what? Okay. Oh yeah, in my country, in the Netherlands, then if you get a grant from the National Funding Foundation, they say, we pay you, it should be freely available to everybody. So we are either in gold or green open access. So because we have been paid by the public, they say it should be freely available to the public. And the only way in which you can guarantee that is by these open access schemes. But so beware, some of the agencies might require it in the future also. And actually the gold open access, that is a format that belongs to the journal. So the journal chooses whether they are gold open access or hybrid or whatever type of. They never choose for black open access. Of course, that's the illegal form that some repositories utilize. They don't pay for it. They make it available to all of us, but it's actually in some countries they run a risk doing that. But anyway, so we have gold open access, so we are obliged to, if we want to have it immediately open, we have to pay the journal quite a sum of money. It's expensive. So some of them, they ask 3,500 euros, which translates to times 20 and then times 1,000 rupiahs. It's a lot of money anyway. And so some publishing companies, they saw that as a business model to publish articles, and their main interest is actually getting the open access in science, because what they do not do, there's one thing they do, they really make you pay. And even they make you pay more than you anticipated in the first place. Yeah. They're also very aggressive. So there is not a day that I do not get a mail from one of those predatory journals. And it really is sort of stroking my self-esteem, because they begin with, we noticed your highly valued paper in this journal, which actually exists, but I didn't know that it was so highly esteemed. And then they say, okay, we would like to offer you the opportunity for publishing in our journal. And these are all the benefits that you get from publishing here in our journal. They never mention that it's 3,000 euros or 2,000 euros in that letter. But so if you respond, then so they start following you the whole time. So they're very aggressive in trying to get you to publish in their journal. So this is the warning: avoid using predatory journals, and they even are so devious that sometimes you think that you know the journal because it's got a very prestigious name. So for instance, Gene is one title which is okay, and they have a predatory journal which is called Genes. So it's just a plural, and if you don't pay attention, you might think that you actually are submitting to a high-ranking journal, whereas you are just submitting to one of those predatory journals. So how do you recognize them? They're listed nowadays. So if you have an open access journal that you are considering for publication, check them there, the Directory of Open Access Journals. It's a web page, and you can actually fill in the title of that journal, and they will tell you whether it's predatory or okay. Yeah, so, and then you can do all the things that you normally do when you suspect that you buy something from an internet shop that is offering something that is too good to be true. Then you look for customer satisfaction in the internet. Most of the time, people, they will put a message on the internet that they have been scammed by one of those journals. And the scam goes sometimes so far that they make you go through the whole peer review cycle. They've sent you a mail, actually, your paper is accepted, congratulations, and then you hear nothing from them anymore. They never publish anything, not even on the internet. So there are all these things, and I'm sure that if it's possible to make my presentation available to you, it will happen. And so look up through the list of things that you might want to check to just see if one of those journals is predatory or if it's okay. It's really devious. So sometimes the editorial board is even completely made up. People are on there which are actually existing people, but they don't know that their name is being used in those editorial boards that are there out on the internet. Okay, then MDPI and frontiers. Everybody should probably know some of those journals. MDPI is going for the worse. Yeah, so there are people that now really say at least a substantial number of the MDPI journals is predatory. And why do they say that? Because the way they calculate their impact factor is not as it's supposed to be. Their review period is on average 20 days from publication or from submission to publication. So in our journal, the direct acceptance rate of any paper that we get, that it's accepted without any editing or further review, is almost 1%. Yeah, so there's always a second revised version that finally gets accepted. To just think about it. So it comes to the editorial office. The editorial office puts it on my desk. I evaluate whether it's suitable to go to peer review because it has to fit the scope of my journal, and it should be of sufficient quality in language and the way the figures are presented. I have to sort of ask one of the editors, could you take this paper? And he has to go out and find at least 2 review reports. And then the average turnaround time is less than 20 days. It cannot happen. Yeah, so there's no way there is a journal that can make that happen with honest, high quality review from peers that are solicited. Okay, you are an expert in this field. Could you check the quality of this paper? That is how a journal works. Rounds in less than 20 days. It's impossible. So if a journal claims to have a guarantee of turnaround less than 30 days, it's predatory. Yeah, there is no quality assurance there. If you then go to what have they published, are they all crappy papers? Probably not. Probably without a lot of review, papers written by you or by me have some quality in it without having the peer review. But is there a guarantee that the quality has been checked? No. So avoid predatory journals. This I found also a very indicative sign that MDPI is really down a slippery slope, and it is that special issues, and they're notorious for having a lower standard of peer review, and sometimes only peer review by the guest editor. That's 150 times as many special issues are being published than there are issues with regular papers. So that already gives you an indication that MDPI is only in it for the money, just to increase the number of manuscripts are being published. and getting the fee for open access. Frontiers, that's a somewhat different story. Frontiers is under discussion. And that is because some of the editorial boards, they have revolted against the publishing company itself because they found it really difficult to give as a final qualification for a submitted abstract or a submitted manuscript to reject it. So in their system, there's almost no way in which they can really get a manuscript out of the peer review process. Yeah, they encourage that all the time it's being reevaluated and reevaluated and reevaluated until the reviewers are fed up and then say, okay, come. So that's also not good quality control. So any journal which is under actually the supervision of a publisher which benefits from this earning model, this business model, you should be really strong if you are accepting a position in such an editorial board. But you should also, as an author, be careful not to spend your money on something which later on will be considered by the outside world as, it looks like a good paper, but we actually do not know how well it has been peer reviewed and how believable the data is. Everybody benefits from an excellent peer review procedure. And so don't go with these journals. Okay. But it's your own responsibility. They have not been jailed yet for fraud or something like that. So just be really careful about it. So later on, from now on, if I have still time, do I have still time or have I exceeded your expectation already? Still time? Still some time? Nope. 3 more minutes, okay. So I'm not accepting any questions on this. So plant biology. Sure. Yeah. But I was sort of stopping here before I went into my plant biology. Plant biology is an old-fashioned journal. This is what happens a lot, that these journals were owned by the botanical societies, and we are a joint enterprise between the Dutch Botanical Society and the German Botanical Society. And so we have a double editor-in-chief type of structure, and so that's the way we work. Okay, if you are submitting a paper, look at this page. Yeah, to see if the scope of your paper fits the journal. For instance, this is a very important one. Biology, plant biology does not accept studies on agricultural practices and on medicinal plants. And that is because there are specialized journals for that, which do a much better job. We don't have a lot of people that are citing those papers among our readership. So we have said, okay, there are better places for that. So if we encounter one of the submissions, it's almost an immediate, polite, not a rejection, but a polite letter saying, okay, we think it's better if you publish it somewhere else. Manuscript guidelines, follow those. Yeah, please be gentle with the editorial office because there's a lot of communications going on between authors that do not follow the instructions. It's really easy to look up the guidelines, and even if you recycle a paper that has been rejected for another journal that you have sort of modified to fit their profile, just be so kind as to modify it to the requirements of the new journal that you submitted to. So what happens next? I do decide whether it's suitable for the journal, and so my rejection rate is, it depends a little bit on the weather in the Netherlands. No, it's joking. It's about 40% that I reject immediately, and 60% I send to one of the editors. And the editor then selects reviewers. That is also something to be considered. This is getting more difficult every year to find reviewers to take on a paper and then also within the time allocated to them write a review on it. So please be so kind that maybe you already get requests. Can you please act as an editor for a paper? If you want to publish yourself, it's your moral duty to once in a while accept such an invitation. Yeah, so don't have as a principle, I don't review other people's papers. Please, if you want to publish yourself, you depend on the reviewing effort of other people. So please also accept once in a while, not every request you should take. Look whether it's from plant biology and then always say yes. But it is some moral obligation that you take upon you. Okay, and then the reviewers, they have to fill out a certain format, and then finally, in the end, they have to answer the question: is it suitable for publication, or after a review, or after complete rewrite, or is it rejected? So these are basically the options that they have. And then I have to make the final decision based on how is the review process gone on. And as a further check, final check, whether all the checks have been set by the editor when the authors claim that they have addressed all the issues that the reviewers have mentioned. So that is the sequence of the review. I'm not going to go through that all because it's very specific for most of the journals, and most of them have a website or web-based submission system, and it's more or less almost self-explanatory. We have an overall rejection rate of 85%, so only 15% of the manuscripts that we get is actually being published. We are at the lower end of the whole scale. So what can you do to increase your chances? Okay, present good science and present it in a good way. that is my answer to a question like that. Be original. Yes, don't sort of pseudo copy a study that has been done before on a different species or in a different ecosystem, but basically it's exactly asking the same question and then using another species or another system. The results are a little bit different, but that is something which is good for a repository, and we do not have yet a really good system for that type of studies in which you can actually look, has it been done already for my particular species? We don't have it, so it's very logical to try and publish it, but it's not Q1, let me put it that way. So it is valuable still, but probably not publishable in a Q1. Work hypothesis driven. So for yourself, it's good, but it's also good for the appreciation of the journal by me, by my editors, by our peer reviewers, but also by the readers. Yeah. So if you can clearly formulate your question and the hypothesis that you're testing, it's much more accessible. And that's why I went through all that trouble of explaining how what my instruction to my student is to do it, and give context. So people have to be helped in sort of seeing the potential for their situation. Yeah? If you only present the results in your conclusion and not saying this might be applicable to way more areas, or maybe it is only for your specific situation, and then they have to do that. Okay, so how do you get past me? Because I have already chopped the head off of 40% of the manuscripts. I read the cover letter. Some people do not even bother to have these admissions saying, and it is repetitive. Yeah, it is repetitive. So some of these things is already in your abstract, or it's evident from your title. But I use that cover letter to have an author given more space to show their enthusiasm and the value of what they have done. So use the cover letter option because it is being read by the editor-in-chief, and I get an impression of, okay, yeah, I see why they are excited. I didn't know this whole area existed, but now I can get excited as well. And that should be your objective, to get me excited about what you have done. You should also address some of the questions and then say, okay, why is it now? Yeah, because I always also wonder, okay, they claim that this is novel, but why didn't anybody else do it before? So most of the time it is because the question did not arise, or it was never an issue, for instance, in agriculture, or the technique was not yet there. So to convince me that it's not just a topic which nobody did before because it was boring. To change that, you have to give me some arguments to believe, all right, there was no way it could be done before, and now we should be the first to publish it. And so that's why use the cover letter. That's my advice to do that. So now, final slide, I think it is. Yes, final slide. Oh no, go back. So what do journals like? Journals like to have a high impact factor. How do you get a high impact factor? Get most of your papers cited several times. What does get cited? Reviews. But don't count on it. If you write a review, a journal will immediately take it, because the review epidemic is almost outnumbering the COVID epidemic. There are plenty of reviews. So really make it apparent in your cover letter why this review is better than all the other reviews on almost the same topic. And then we will be glad to take those. But there are a lot of reviews redone, not providing a lot of new articles on model organisms or crop species. They always are cited well. Articles on species interaction, so more in the ecological realm, and articles on novel models, and they are cited well. Plant biology doesn't do them. So those are the areas where you have a high chance of getting accepted, because all the journals know that these types of titles and papers do get cited a lot. Yeah, so don't be down when your topic is not among these lists. But these are having some sort of an advantage, because the journals know that they will be cited a lot. Still, we are not foul-proof, because we sometimes have rejected the paper because we thought it had low potential, and it proved to be a highly cited paper. So, okay. So, if plant biology does reject you, don't give up hope. Okay, so to look at, if you cannot find it, do these exercises for yourself. Yeah. So just Google your field of expertise and try to write an abstract, and then have somebody else look at it with editor-in-chief kind of eyes. Do they get excited about it if they're not part of the? But do that at home, not during question hour. Okay. Time for questions. Yeah.
So, thank you, Theo, for sharing with us. Now
Please look very inviting.
Oh, yes, sure.
Big guy.
Okay, thank you for sharing with us, Theo. Now time for questions. I think we have time for one or two questions, please, from the audience. Yes, Mas yang di belakang. So, first one is you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor, for the explanation. I'm Rio Kaban. I'm from physics, natural science, and mathematics. I would like to ask a question. We know that almost all of the aspects that reviewers use in reviewing journal is objective. Are an objective aspects, for example, like the title, data, and so on. But I'm sorry, but I'm curious to ask this: that are there some subjective aspects that reviewers usually use? For example, like the importance of the subfield or a field study that reviewers use to accepting our paper in journal. Thank you very much.
My answer would be, maybe the majority is really very subjective. Because the criteria of evaluating a really high quality journal, they are just checkable. Yeah. So what we are dealing with most of the time is, apart from what I said, well, sometimes they're really technical issues with the paper, but most of the time the objective criteria are being checked by the author themselves or their supervisor and the author. I mean, they have already been screened like that. So what we see, according to the objective criteria, would be almost always admissible, we rarely even encounter flaws in statistics or the statistical method that has been used, which in the past was overseen quite often, that they claimed something on statistical tests that were not valid for that type of situation. But most of the time, I must admit, there is a strong subjective, what type of science do you prefer and does it fit with my preferences, that plays a role. I'm sorry to say that.
Yes. Okay.
It's also a compliment for most of the authors that they actually have learned how to at least present their data in a professional way, that qualitatively in a technical sense is always up to scratch. Although, I mean, having said that, about 5% is not, but I mean, that is not the majority of the rejections. The majority of the rejections is, if you would answer that question, I would have approached it differently, and the author does not explain why he chose this. I mean, we get that from reviewers. Very, very subjective.
Very subjective.
Yeah? So, and there's nothing that you can sort of find on the web, I think, that is a checklist. If you make sure that this and this and this, you qualify to all the objective criteria, and you have actually a case to go to court to demand publication because the journal did not meet their own criteria in being objective on it. No, there's a strong subjectivity to it. And that's another thing. If you want to appeal to that, if you know that there is this preferences in a journal community or an editorial board, if you're not sure whether the journal is right for you, then please send us the title and the abstract and a version of the cover letter that you write later on, and ask, would you consider this for publication? I mean, we always answer if we think that it appeals to us already. It's going to get into the peer review system. And no guarantee yet, but at least you've overcome some of the subjectivity that goes with the journal.
Yes, at least we have a higher probability to be accepted.
Right,
yes.
Exactly. And once you are past me, the acceptance rate goes up to 40%. So
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Okay, second. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. My name is Gimba Osman. I'm from the biology program. Actually, I have 3 questions. I don't know whether I can be able to ask all the questions, or maybe I should just ask the most important one, which is about writing. So I was reading a research methodology textbook. So in one of the sections, I saw that you should do the writing before the research, not that you just finish the research before doing the writing. So I got confused. What does it actually mean?
Of course, I mean, some of the writing is based on your brand application, your project proposal. You recycle some of that. So the project didn't change during the research. Oh, sorry, I have to use the microphone. But if you really consider, okay, how to tell the best story, yeah. Oh, I know where that comes from. Yeah, but no, that is a way of getting rid of the bias that is included into. Okay, you propose a hypothesis, yeah, and you write them down, and you also submit it together with a testing protocol to the journal, and then no matter what the outcome is, that is what it is. Yeah, the journal has already committed to accept it before you have actually done the experiment based on your question, your hypothesis, and your design. Yeah, that is a way in which we can get rid of 2 biases One is in the authors that they actually change their hypothesis during the research, which statistically is p-harking, it's called, I think. And the other bias is that everybody that publishes has found a positive result. Negative results are very rare to find and also very rare to get accepted. And to avoid that, then they have this system. I think that you're referring to that. Statistically, it makes sense to sort of write out everything, but I mean, maybe that is an image of the ideal world, how we should work when we are hypothesis-driven and statistically non-biased. But we are not ideal, we are humans. And we like to have good, understandable, accessible stories. That's where I say it's don't do it. Don't write your paper before you got the data.
Okay, can I go ahead and ask the second question? Session, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will hang around. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so everyone, thank you, Theo. So I have two messages to all of you, what I can extract from Theo's presentation. The first one is a good researcher is excited about the results. And when you're writing in your paper, remember that you need to get your readers excited as well, especially the first gate, the chief editor. So you have to make him excited about your research. And then later, the reviewer. So if you're not excited about your research, maybe we have no hope about your paper that you're writing. So be excited, make a good story of your research. And the second message, this would be for us who already invited for being a reviewer. For your information, I know that you know that being a reviewer is unpaid. And it's exciting to do that, but sometimes in our task, we have this task, that task, so we tend to ignore the invitation to be a reviewer. But Theo has a good message that if you would like to publish at least, I don't know, perhaps 5 papers a year, then please review 5 papers a year as well. So that's a good balance. And now it's getting more and more difficult. I agree with Theo, even I as an editor, sometimes we have to invite 15, 20, just to get none of them agree to review a paper. So yeah, please accept more invitation to be reviewers. Okay. 45, okay. One review, and then you need to find another one, so 90, okay. Okay, so I think that would be all from this session with Theo. Please a big applause for Theo for sharing with us. Okay. Thank you. So now I would hand over to the MC.
We would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Pak Theo for this valuable and inspiring insight, and to Ibu Karlia Meita for her excellent moderation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us show our appreciation once again with a round of applause for Pak Theo and Ibu Karlia Meita. Next, a token of appreciation from the Director of Research and Innovation, ITB, will be presented to Pak Theo and Ibu Karlia Meita. We kindly invite Ibu Isti to present the souvenir to Pak Theo, and Pak Nur to present the souvenir to Ibu Karlia. Please. Ibu Nia, please help. Thank you. Finally, we kindly invite Patio to join a group photo, please. Let us the DRD photo team to help take a group photo from the front. From the front. Setelah ini masih ada acara Bapak Ibu, mohon berkenan untuk tidak meninggalkan ruangan. Pak Ali di aba-aba ya. Bapak Ibu izin agar mohon perkenannya tetap masih ada di ruangan ini. Karena setelah ini kita masih ada agenda kedua. Pak Yanto mohon dicek di layar, Pak Elfami sudah hadir ya. Ibu Isti. Bapak dan Ibu, izin untuk acara selanjutnya. Selanjutnya kita akan memasuki acara berikutnya, yaitu launching program CERDAS. Untuk itu kami mengundang Profesor Dr. El Fahmi, Direktur Riset dan Inovasi ITB untuk memberikan sambutan singkat pembukaan peluncuran. Kepada Pak El Fahmi disilakan. Mohon maaf, suara Pak El Fahmi belum terdengar, sebentar ya Pak.
Thanks, Pak Theo, right? Who already presented for the encouragement presentation to our lectures, the attendee for this sharing sessions. It was really encouraging, Pak Theo. Hopefully, especially our young researchers can publish in your journal, right? Plant biology. I know this and others reputed journal, international journal. Thank you very much again, Pak Theo. Yeah, hopefully we can have any communication for the future. Bapak Ibu sekalian, pertama saya mohon maaf tidak bisa hadir bersama Bapak Ibu karena kebetulan ada sidang S3, saya online juga, sehingga tidak bisa hadir bersama Bapak Ibu sekalian, dan terima kasih tentunya kepada Ibu Karlia Meita ya, yang sudah menjadi moderator, yang terhormat juga Pak Nur Ahmadi sebagai Deputi Riset, Ibu Isti sebagai Deputi Inovasi, Bu Novi dan Bapak Ibu sekalian, para dosen yang hadir pada kesempatan ini, dosen dan juga ada mahasiswa. Kita berbahagia sekali pada hari ini Bapak Ibu setelah kita mendapatkan pencerahan bagaimana menulis artikel ilmiah pada jurnal bereputasi oleh Pak Theo. Akhirnya kita juga sampai kepada sebuah acara yang saya pikir amat penting di ITB, yaitu kita launching sebuah program yang tujuannya untuk meningkatkan jumlah, kuantitas dan juga kualitas jurnal-jurnal, publikasi-publikasi yang ada di ITB, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Sebagaimana kita ketahui, ITB ini punya target, ya, punya dalam rencana strategis ITB 5 tahun ke depan. Itu diantaranya adalah yang paling encouraging bagi kita, yang paling membuat kita bersemangat untuk mencapainya itu adalah rencana ITB untuk menaikkan ranking menjadi ranking 150 di dunia, yang pada saat ini kita masih berada pada 255. Nah, dari parameter penilaian tersebut itu yang paling menentukan diantaranya itu yang saat ini nilai kita masih perlu ditingkatkan itu adalah citasi per fakulti. Citasi per fakulti dan kemudian juga International Research Network. Nah, citasi per fakulti ini itu sangat erat kaitannya dengan publikasi Bapak Ibu. Jadi publikasi yang disitasi banyak orang, maka itu akan meningkatkan citasi per fakulti. Ini kita masih banyak PR. Untuk itu Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita berpikir bagaimana kita bisa mencapai target-target tersebut. Salah satu targetnya itu adalah untuk memperbanyak publikasi kita di jurnal yang bereputasi, yang tentunya bisa dibaca oleh orang di dunia global, sehingga bisa disitasi oleh para peneliti-peneliti gitu. Nah, untuk itu Bapak Ibu sekalian, kita ingin membuat sebuah program dan hari ini kita launching. Ini di bawah koordinasi Bu Isti dan Pak Nur Ahmadi, yaitu apa yang kita sebut singkatannya itu dengan CERDAS. Ya, dengan CERDAS. CERDAS ini memang sangat identik dengan lembaga akademik, ya, membuat semua orang cerdas gitu. Tapi cerdas di sini kepanjangan dari watching eksklusif riset dan draft artikel saintifik. Jadi bahasanya itu adalah bagaimana kita melakukan pelatihan training, coaching terhadap jurnal-jurnal yang direncanakan akan disubmit di jurnal, harapannya menjadi di jurnal top tier begitu. Kita berharap nanti kita sediakan ada ruangan khusus di lantai 6 di CRCS Bapak Ibu untuk menjadi tempat Bapak Ibu nanti berkomunikasi dengan coachnya, dengan pelatihnya gitu. Jadi sudah dikembangkan juga platformnya, di Bapak Ibu bisa melihat jadwal yang available, siapa saja coachnya, lalu memilih waktunya, nanti bisa berkomunikasi di tempat itu dan juga mungkin di tempat secara online gitu. Nah, ini salah satu upaya kita untuk memperbanyak artikel-artikel yang berkualitas sehingga target-target kita jumlah dan kualitas proposal itu bisa semakin bertambah dalam waktu cepat, Bapak Ibu. Tapi tentunya kita berharap artikel-artikel yang kita publish tersebut itu adalah artikel-artikel yang memang berkualitas. Karena kita jaga walaupun kita ingin mencapai peringkat, tapi jangan lupa bahwasanya peringkat yang kita capai itu betul-betul secara nature itu menggambarkan kualitas dari publikasi-publikasi yang kita publish di jurnal-jurnal bereputasi. Bapak Ibu juga ingat ada juga yang membuat warning kita ya. Jadi ada peneliti yang menyampaikan RI kuadrat, Riset Integrity yang dimana beberapa perguruan tinggi di Indonesia dapat red warning gitu ya, peringatan merah. Ada yang kuning, ada yang putih, ada yang hijau ya. Ada hijau, kita berharap kita bisa menjadi turun ke hijau gitu. Walaupun data ini sebenarnya ada betul-betul, tapi mampu memberikan warning kepada kita untuk kita berhati-hati bahwasanya untuk publikasi kita betul-betul memperhatikan kualitas dari jurnal, dari artikel yang akan kita publish itu. Untuk mencapai itu Bapak Ibu, sekali lagi kita bersama-sama tentunya, karena yang menjadi ujung tombak pencapaian citasi per fakulti itu adalah Bapak Ibu sekalian para peneliti. Sehingga kita sebagai yang diamanahi untuk memanage, mengorganisirnya, itu salah satu programnya itu adalah untuk membuat program yang kita sebut dengan coaching klinik, ya, coaching klinik, pelatihan untuk menulis pada jurnal ilmiah bereputasi. Jadi Bapak Ibu bisa membuat draft artikelnya, langsung nanti bisa mengontak coaching klinik itu pada daftar yang nanti akan disampaikan barangkali secara detailnya oleh Ibu Isti dan teman-teman begitu. Bapak Ibu sekalian, mudah-mudahan cerdas ini itu betul-betul kemudian menjadi sarana kita untuk memperbanyak ya, jumlah artikel kita pada jurnal bereputasi tinggi, top tier diantaranya, sehingga meningkatkan jumlah sitasi kita. Jumlah sitasi kita tentunya berkontribusi terhadap jumlah sitasi per fakultas, Bapak Ibu sekalian, dengan nature, dengan kualitas yang sangat baik. Untuk itu hari ini kita launch, kita kick off ya untuk kegiatan cerdas ini ya, cerdas coaching eksklusif riset ya, riset juga nanti untuk pelaksanaan riset, karena publikasi ini sangat tergantung kepada bagaimana kita menghandle riset yang berkualitas juga, cerdas dan draft artikel saintifik. Silakan Bapak Ibu nanti berkunjung, ada disediakan juga kopi-kopi, berbagai macam jenis kopi di sana dengan para coach yang tentunya berharap sudah mempunyai pengalaman dengan top tier yang dengan jurnal ilmiah yang tinggi dengan H indeks tinggi juga begitu. Untuk itu kita langsung Bapak Ibu pada kesempatan ini kita dengan menyebut nama Allah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, cerdas coaching eksklusif artikel riset dan artikel dan draft artikel saintis secara resmi kita umumkan Bapak Ibu sekalian. Terima kasih, mudah-mudahan cerdas itu betul-betul menghasilkan orang-orang yang cerdas tentunya. Demikian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Elfahmi atas sambutannya. Berikutnya adalah paparan terkait program cerdas yang akan disampaikan oleh Ibu Isti, Deputi Direktur Bidang Inovasi, Sains dan Teknologi, Direktorat Riset dan Inovasi. Kepada Bu Isti, disilakan.
Oke. Ya, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ini terima kasih banyak masih tetap bertahan di acara ini. Sedikit lagi mungkin ya, terima kasih Pak Elfahmi tadi sudah meresmikan gitu ya program cerdas yang diinisiasi oleh DRI. Nah, saya sendiri akan memberikan teknis gitu ya, penerangan teknis, penjelasan teknis terkait dengan program cerdas ini apa sih gitu ya. Mungkin bisa ditampilkan slide-nya. Ini sepertinya mayoritas mahasiswa S2, S3, ya berarti sepertinya program ini akan sangat dibutuhkan, akan sangat dinantikan. Mudah-mudahan bisa membantu teman-teman semua di sini untuk bisa mencapai target publikasi di jurnal yang diharapkan begitu ya. Karena publikasi merupakan salah satu syarat lulus untuk program S3 gitu ya. S2 juga sama, di encourage untuk setidaknya submit dan juga under review apabila memang ingin yudisiumnya cum laude ke atas gitu ya. Kalau tidak under review statusnya maka tidak bisa cum laude gitu teman-teman di sini gitu. Jadi memang harus diupayakan walaupun di S2 publikasinya jangan hanya submit tapi juga bisa under review. Nah, di program cerdas ini seperti tadi sudah disampaikan oleh Pak Elfahmi bahwa kita akan mengadakan seperti halnya coaching klinik, tapi betul-betul klinik gitu ya. Jadi kita akan membuka praktek dalam tanda petik nanti di DRI di lantai 6 dan nanti teman-teman di sini bisa membooking jadwal. Coachnya ini gimana teknisnya? Itu bisa one-on-one. Jadi memang private, ya private satu coach dengan satu mentee begitu ya. Ataupun misalkan Bu boleh nggak saya datangnya mau bareng teman-teman gitu. Nggak berani datang ke DRI sendirian gitu ya. Jadi mau bareng sama teman-teman gitu ya, boleh dipersilakan gitu ya. Tapi nanti di form nanti mungkin ditunjukkan di slide ya. Nanti teman-teman harus menginfokan dulu nanti datangnya itu mau sendirian atau dalam grup gitu ya. Jadi secara teknisnya teman-teman di sini harus punya draft publikasi dulu tentu saja ya. Nah, waktu coachingnya itu tidak bisa terlalu lama, jadi hanya sekitar 30 menit, tetapi berkelanjutan selama 2 bulan. Harapannya memang nanti proses coaching itu menghasilkan publikasi yang bisa disubmit gitu. Jadi tidak hanya coaching satu kali udah selesai gitu ya, tidak seperti itu. Tapi nanti bentuknya coachingnya itu berkelanjutan. Nah, karena sesinya hanya 30 menit, nanti teman-teman di sini bisa milih pada saat nanti daftar itu harus menentukan tujuan. Tujuannya apakah di sesi itu akan membahas abstrak misalkan atau memilih jurnal gitu. Jadi harus dimention. Jadi tidak mungkin nanti dalam waktu 30 menit itu semua dibahas gitu ya, satu paper kan tidak mungkin ya. Tadi seperti halnya yang Pak Theo sampaikan gitu ya. Mulai dari judul abstrak sampai pembahasan data dan seterusnya itu kan butuh dibuat supaya memang bisa menarik gitu ya. Judul aja ternyata itu adalah satu bagian advertise gitu ya untuk mengiklankan penelitian yang sudah kita lakukan gitu. Kadang-kadang kita membuat judul ya judul nggak terlalu memperhatikan sampai aspek advertise-nya gitu ya. Jadi hanya melihat aspek kesesuaian dengan substansi gitu ya. Padahal ternyata sebenarnya judul itu menjadi sangat penting dan juga abstrak itu menjadi pintu gerbang awal gitu ya. Apakah manuskrip kita itu akan diterima atau ditolak gitu. Nah jadi itu menjadi hal yang sangat penting gitu. Tadi juga dibahas terkait misalkan cover letter gitu ya, itu juga menjadi sangat penting. Jadi nanti pada saat sesi coaching itu teman-teman bisa memilih gitu ya. Teman-teman bisa memilih mana saja yang tujuan dari pertemuannya, coachingnya itu untuk apa gitu. Ya, itu menjadi sangat penting. Nah, ini program cerdasnya. Jadi kita sudah membuat logo ya. Ada logo cerdas dengan tagline Smart Writing Strong Research gitu ya, karena tidak mungkin kita punya kekuatan dari riset itu salah satunya adalah dengan kita menuliskannya gitu kan ya. Dengan kita menuliskannya maka kita bisa membuat penelitian kita itu menjadi bermanfaat. Kalau tagline-nya Pak Menteri sekarang kan berdampak gitu ya. Nah salah satunya itu dari paper yang kita tulis. Next. Nah ini makna dari logonya, jadi sebenarnya kenapa kita membuat cerdas ini dalam sebuah orbit gitu ya. Karena diharapkan cerdas ini menjadi lintasan yang bisa menuntun ide agar menemukan jalur terbaiknya. Nah jalurnya itu di-guide oleh coach gitu ya. Jadi filosofisnya seperti itu gitu ya. Dan bintang di situ adalah simbol dari puncak pencapaian, prestasi dan inspirasi di mana karya ilmiah yang dihasilkan itu bisa bersinar di panggung internasional melalui proses yang coaching yang dilakukan gitu ya. Kurang lebih seperti itu. Oke, next. Ya intinya cerdas ini hadir karena memang sebenarnya keberhasilan publikasi bukanlah tujuan akhir melainkan hasil dan proses kolaboratif yang berkelanjutan. Jadi harapannya dengan cerdas ini teman-teman di sini semua bisa berkolaborasi dan kemudian juga bisa menghasilkan tulisan-tulisan yang memang kemudian bisa berdampak gitu. Oke, next. Nah, tujuannya sebenarnya tadi intinya ingin meningkatkan jumlah publikasi di jurnal internasional, khususnya jurnal top tier. Ada yang pernah di sini menulis di jurnal top tier? Ada? Ada yang ingin? Ada ya. Nah, nanti ketika melakukan registrasi, nanti teman-teman bisa cek apakah karyanya di jurnal top tier, Q1, Q2 dan seterusnya. Kalau ingin di jurnal top tier, nanti kita akan carikan coachnya juga memang sudah berpengalaman untuk publikasi di jurnal top tier gitu. Jadi jangan khawatir, kita akan coba matchkan begitu. Jadi tujuannya adalah tentu saja tidak hanya kuantitas tapi juga kualitas, kemudian mendorong supaya tingkat, kan tidak hanya submit ya kalau publikasi itu, tetapi juga harus sampai accepted dan juga sampai disitasi gitu kan, harapannya seperti itu. Jadi proses coaching ini sebenarnya arahnya nanti ke sana gitu. Oke, next. Nah, ini alur bagaimana nanti program cerdas ini bisa diimplementasikan. Jadi pertama harus registrasi dan login dulu ya. Nah, untuk registrasinya sudah ada pada pegang cardnya. Nah, itu ada barcode-nya. Nah, di barcode itu link untuk registrasi ya. Jadi nanti bisa silahkan untuk registrasi. Kemudian nanti bagi yang sudah registrasi dan diterima itu akan diberikan akses untuk ke MyPPM. Jadi kalau untuk mahasiswa saat ini belum ada akses ke MyPPM, baru dosen saja. Jadi kalau dosen itu tidak perlu untuk mengaktifkan akun gitu ya, tetapi kalau mahasiswa nanti harus mengaktifkan akun MyPPM dulu setelah registrasi dilakukan. Nah, untuk batch pertama kami membatasi hanya untuk 50 pendaftar pertama. Ya, jadi bagi teman-teman di sini sudah punya draft, jadi silakan untuk segera mendaftar karena limited seat-nya gitu ya, kursinya terbatas. Jadi silakan untuk melakukan registrasi. Nah, 50 pendaftar pertama ini di batch pertama itu akan di-coach selama 2 bulan. gitu ya. Jadi harapannya selama 2 bulan ini teman-teman sudah bisa submit gitu. Nah, yang lain bagaimana? Yang lain kalau misalkan akan registrasi silahkan, tetapi statusnya waiting list. Ya, tetap nanti akan dilayani, tetapi statusnya waiting list. Mudah-mudahan nanti yang di batch pertama ini, kalau misalkan akan selesai gitu ya, sebelum 2 bulan itu sudah selesai, maka nanti yang waiting list bisa masuk gitu. Ya, jadi kalau ada teman-temannya yang dalam waktu 2 bulan, dalam waktu 1 bulan itu sudah submit duluan gitu ya, belum menyelesaikan periode 2 bulannya. Oke, thank you so much Theo. Jadi belum selesai waktu 2 bulannya, nanti yang waiting listnya bisa masuk gitu. Ya, jadi kuotanya di 50 itu dibatasi dulu karena terkait dengan jumlah coachnya gitu ya dan ketersediaan waktu gitu. Ya, sementara dibatasi 50 dulu. Jadi segera lakukan registrasi dan kemudian nanti akan diberikan akses ke MyPPM. Nah, nanti pada saat booking bisa mengisi beberapa data yang dibutuhkan di sana, kemudian memilih slot waktu coaching. Nah, ini memilih slot waktu coaching itu setelah registrasi dilakukan ya, setelah login di MyPPM baru nanti di situ akan tersedia slot waktu coachingnya. Masing-masing jadwal itu nanti kalau sudah full book itu udah nggak bisa di booking lagi gitu ya. Jadi nanti kita akan melakukan secara online. Nah, apa yang harus dipersiapkan sebelum coaching? Teman-teman harus punya draft publikasinya terlebih dahulu. Kemudian disiapkan gambar atau tabel yang memang akan mensupport manuskripnya. Dan 3 artikel pembanding sebagai acuan. Jadi 3 artikel pembanding ini referensi utama gitu ya. Jadi untuk bisa dilihat sebenarnya nanti perbedaan dengan studi-studi sebelumnya itu seperti apa dan gapnya apa gitu. Dan yang tadi yang disampaikan Theo juga yang paling penting adalah questionnya gitu ya. Nah, research question itu biasanya kan juga terkait dengan studi-studi sebelumnya gitu. Dilihat dari gapnya seperti apa, makanya nanti diminta 3 artikel pembanding sebagai acuan untuk bisa melihat setidaknya gap dengan studi-studi sebelumnya seperti apa. Kemudian, nah ini menentukan prioritas, memilih maksimum 2 tujuan utama. Apakah ingin mencari jurnal yang fit, atau abstrak, atau diskusi, atau alur penulisan, atau ingin membuat cover letter gitu ya, dan seterusnya gitu ya. Jadi maksimum 2, 1 juga tidak apa-apa gitu ya. Tapi fokus gitu, nanti yang akan dibahas memang hanya bagian itu saja dari papernya pada saat coaching. Oke, next. Nah, ini durasinya tadi 30 menit. Kemudian nanti ada coaching card. Jadi coachingnya nanti akan juga mengisi form secara online. Jadi nanti progres teman-teman semua di sini akan bisa dilihat di MyPPM-nya gitu ya. Bisa dilihat di sana dan kemudian nanti di akhir ada assessment progress dan ditentukan tahapan berikutnya apa. Apakah memang langsung submit atau memang ada diskusi tambahan seperti itu. Next, hilang. Langsung berikutnya kayaknya hanya 1 lagi. Nah, ini kita namakan cerdas corner gitu ya. Jadi nanti kita akan melakukan sesi coaching di sini ya. Jadi ada beberapa meja, di situ ada minibar. Jadi tadi Pak El juga sudah sampaikan bisa sambil ngopi-ngopi. Kita punya barista, tenang ya. Kita di DRI ada barista. Jadi nanti bisa pesan juga di sana minuman. Tapi gratis nggak ya Bu Novi? Ya nanti kalau berbayar atau gratis saya tidak tahu, tapi nanti tanya ke Bu Novi deh, bayar atau gratis gitu ya. Tapi nanti ada di sana ada barista, tapi sepertinya sih gratis gitu ya. Jadi bisa sambil pesen juga minuman, ada yang suka kopi ya, kopi apalah minuman ringan di sana bisa dipesan gitu. Nah ini jadi nanti sesi coachingnya nanti akan dilakukan di Cerdas Corner ini di gedung CRCS lantai 6. Oke, itu sepertinya udah. Nah ini mari bergabung ya, wujudkan publikasi Anda di jurnal impian, biarkan ide Anda menemukan orbitnya dan menjadi cahaya ilmiah. smart writing, strong research gitu ya. Oke, baik, mungkin itu yang bisa saya sampaikan. Terima kasih, ditunggu partisipasi dari semuanya. Saya kembalikan ke Bu Novi.
Terima kasih Bu Isti. Tadi pertanyaannya saya jawab ya Bu Isti ya, gratis ya Bu Isti ya. Ada kopi, coklat, matcha, silakan ditunggu di DRI lantai 6 ya. Demikian peluncuran resmi program cerdas. Semoga program ini menjadi langkah konkret dalam memperkuat budaya publikasi ilmiah berkualitas di ITB. Semoga kegiatan ini memberikan inspirasi dan motivasi bagi kita semua untuk terus menghasilkan dan mempublikasikan riset unggul dari institusi tercinta kita ITB. Sampai jumpa di sharing session volume 9. Kami tutup. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.